Okay, that's my cue. We'll get started. My name is Casey Evans. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at EdPlus at Arizona State University. And I'm going to have my panelists introduce themselves.
Thank you. Thank you. No? Is it on? Thank you. Okay, tech problems. My name is Annie Hale. I'm the Executive Director of a learning laboratory called Action Lab at EdPlus, Arizona State University.
I'm Amanda Gulley, Chief of Product and User Experience over at EdPlus at Arizona State University.
Okay, I should tell you that we had a beautiful presentation planned until I realized we didn't have opportunity to do a presentation in this room, so we'll be happy to share it with you. So we are converting quickly to a panel and having a discussion in general about how we think about data-informed decision-making and using data to make excellent decisions, that I hope that are excellent decisions in the work that we do every day. But to ground us, I want to talk a little bit about what is EdPlus and what do we do at Arizona State University. So we have our little banner over there, which is helpful. But at EdPlus, we're focused on digital teaching and learning and really thinking about how we unlock the potential of students and provide access to education to help them to be as successful as possible. This microphone is so loud. Sorry if you're all deaf after this session. So we do a lot of things at EdPlus. The majority of the work is focused on supporting as a central service to the university, Arizona State University Online, where we provide the wraparound support system to enable the academic units, to really think about how to be the best at what they do, to be great faculty, and to really focus on their programs while we provide wraparound services and support and think about the operational infrastructure to support online learning. We do a lot of other things that are innovative technologies and implementations. Dreamscape Learn is really focused from EdPlus. So is Study Hall, our partnership with Complexly and YouTube. And some of the work on the partnerships, Starbucks College Achievement Plan, and the new partnership with the University of Tennessee, Knoxville will also be centered out of EdPlus. But for today's purposes, we're going to talk about Arizona State University Online. And really how we center to get things done at ASU Online. So one of the things I wanted to ask first, Annie, is how do we gather information about the humans who want to take classes with us at ASU Online?
Yeah, we're really... Okay, no, yes, good. We're really interested in thinking about who might come to ASU, what those learners' lives look like from the individual perspective, right? It's really about thinking about the personalized learning opportunities that the data, the infrastructure that we have affords us. And so it's not just an imaginary potential student. We actually have the ability to create personas, understand at the individual level who would be eligible to potentially come to ASU, pursue opportunities at Arizona State University, whether they're degree seeking or non-degree seeking or building up toward that degree opportunity. But it's about bucketing the information in a really intelligent way and thinking beyond individualized demographic factors and looking at it from an intersectional identities perspective. So thinking about who are these students, how can we serve them, and how can we serve them swiftly and in an elegant way. Amanda.
I think we have to remember that we're serving humans, and humans are complex, and we have complex lives. And Google came out with a statistic recently that 99% of student journeys are unique. And so when we think about how we're going to serve students, and we have a gap of 40 million Americans right now that started college and never finished, we have to understand the humans in which we serve and how we should serve them. And so a lot of our time, we, even before they come into our ecosystem within an Arizona State University, spending time understanding the online student demographic. Are they parents? Do they have transfer credits? Are they working full-time? Do they need flexibility? And so we spend a lot of time either doing user research, user testing, competitive analysis, market research, building out personas, understanding their motivations, and also what fears they have, and even understanding what their barriers are, whether it's finances, whether it's the admissions process. And so I think it's so important before you even get data into your university or even within your institution, you understand what students want from an online perspective. It's many different things, and thinking about how do we individualize that once they come in is very different from how we even start to understand them from before they come into our doors.
Yeah, and being flexible with the data that we collect. So it's not about expecting the data to always be obvious, but it's about being prepared with a data infrastructure that allows for flexibility of who these learners are and how they evolve within our ecosystem. So they may start out here and they may actually switch into something different, and having a flexible infrastructure behind the scenes, it's not only capturing that traditional student information data, but other touch points about their journey, their feelings. So that blend of quantitative and qualitative, I think, is really important. And thinking about them from an end-to-end perspective, but end being well before they get to Arizona State University, and end in a kind of never-ending sense that they may actually come back to ASU, and being prepared with that full learner journey is one of the things that we work diligently on behind the scenes.
Thank you both. I will say that one thing we should call out is that ASU Online did not spring fully formed with 95,000 students, right? We started somewhere. Dean Regier is here, who helped start ASU Online, and they started with 4 programs and 400 students, and now we're above 300 programs and 95,000 students. This year we'll graduate 100,000 students this year, and so there's a difference between where you start and where you end up. And when I think about that, I think about how we frame now, what we think about today versus what we might have thought about yesterday. One of the things that we keep central to the work that we do is the charter. And I'm sure you've seen the charter if you've looked at ASU anywhere, but it's about access, it's about inclusive excellence, it's about making sure everyone has an opportunity for an education of quality, and that we can give back and help them give back to the communities that they serve. And so we frame around that with goals that are very clear, and create an operational plan with objectives and key results that allow us to focus all of the efforts of our staff on figuring out what that data says to help us to drive change that might be transformational. And our goals are really to hit 150,000 students by 2028. That number could change tomorrow, so stay tuned to that one. Graduate 40,000 students a year as a university, and then to really make sure that we take responsibility for those communities that we serve and ensure that those students are ready to go in to workforce and be successful. One thing that I will pull out is I found this quote from Dr. Crow from 2012 where he said that analytics are not the end, they are the means to the end. So I wanted to ask you, Annie, what might that mean in your perspective?
Yeah, so I've been talking about with these two here for quite some time about being data rich and insights or knowledge poor, right? And I think this might resonate with many of you, is that there's just so much data at any one point in time that a university or any company or entity is collecting, but it's what you do with that data that really matters. And so you've collected it. So what? What are you going to do with it? How does it improve the things that you're trying to achieve? What do your end goals look like? And how do you measure that endpoint that you're trying to get toward? And what does it look like to build a flexible infrastructure of that data pipeline? That's really critical to the work that we're doing. This actually comes from a book from 1983, and the acronym is DRIP, data rich, information poor. And anyway, I think that that's like a kind of an organizing principle as we work on the various assets that we engage on, whether they're online or on campus or any type of asset, being careful that we collect the right data, but it's the right data to measure the things that really matter the most to us. And of course, a big key component of that is inclusive excellence. And so making sure that we are strategic about the types of data that we collect and thinking carefully about how we measure the things that matter. Inclusive excellence is really about prioritization of excellence, right? And that means inviting everybody in, giving equal opportunity to every single learner that we have, but also being careful that we build data infrastructures that give us insights to improve our product along the way.
Amanda, what types of data would you say are the main types of data that we work with on a daily basis? So we know when we talk about data, it feels very nebulous. Can you provide some concrete context on what that might mean?
There's so much data, and it's knowing where to start. I think that's probably the biggest challenge for us. We're a user experience team. There's so much data that goes through the student journey, whether it is, again, understanding before they come into us who they are, to then beginning to A/B test different hypotheses of what we think students need. So that might look like behavioral analytics. We use Google Analytics a lot to understand what students are digesting, what do they want more of. Then as they provide us interest, right? We get a little bit more data about them that helps us start to personalize their path. That might be through communications. It might be through outreach through our centers. It might even be surveys that we're sending out along the way to kind of start building out that profile for the student to Annie's point earlier, they may not have started in ASU within a degree-seeking program. They might have started from a learning kind of non-credit course earlier on. And what we're even trying to tackle right now is the university is very large, and how do we kind of bring that student profile to a single place so that we can serve them better? We're not being redundant, we're being more seamless. And so that data is very rich, and I think what I've experienced over the last 5 years is we've spent a lot of time optimizing because we have so much data, and from a user experience lens, I want to solve for every single problem a student has. But then you question, are you making the biggest impact? Is it really the biggest thing that you can do to serve students? And we've kind of gone through a transformation recently in terms of how do we work together more holistically and comprehensively across the student journey? How do we bring in partners at our colleges, within our provost team, the experts across the different areas of which a student may have a touch point with, whether it's transfer, admissions, advising, financial aid. I think we get so focused just in teaching and learning, we forget there is an entire journey and support and resources that go around serving a human, that there's so many other reasons why students are not successful. And so you could probably talk a little bit more about what that data might look like once they're in and what that might look like within the course experience.
Yeah, so again, I'm very focused on this idea of like what I'm dubbing a golden thread, you guys, okay? So like, top of funnel, before a student is at ASU, what does it look like all the way till graduation and then even beyond? And then, being careful about measuring the things that matter most to us. So strategic investments that we might make, adaptive curriculum, virtual reality, of course we want to collect those things. But I worry when I see data in isolation that it's not part of a larger narrative, and just being mindful that if you're collecting it in, say, Bio 181 freshman year experience, that has meaning along the whole entire trajectory of a degree program, right? And that it's not just discrete data in isolation, but it's actually in conversation with one another. So at an individual level, we have program health reports, we have course health reports. We're really trying to look at what are potential positive course pairings, toxic course pairings, and then when we uncover these little nuggets of information, that we think deeply about what they mean and who we need to bring into the room to really understand them in a 360 perspective. So let's say we uncover this course plus this course is a really great positive impact on students being successful one term to the next term and so forth. What does that mean in terms of like strategic planning? Might we unlock different ways of students moving through a program? We offer students, connections between, if you're in a degree major map, right? We map these things out. How can we look at that which we've already created and be more strategic with it? So there's a lot of artifacts at ASU and probably everywhere, right, that were created years ago. And I think part of our teams here are really interested in looking at those artifacts and making sure that they still make sense within the ecosystem that we have now, along with machine learning. And so that's machine learning not only across like programs and across courses, but it's machine learning from term to term success. And so what if I could say to you, by week 3, if a student isn't doing X, we should be concerned about them because we want to support them and come in and support whatever it is, the trouble that's happening in week 3. And so we're trying to get really granular, but also really strategic with the data that we're collecting, because too much data and you're kind of lost in a sea of possibilities. And so it's about building measurement plans and really being thoughtful about where we want to go with the data and then the impact that we can have, but not just within EdPlus, but across the university, and rich partnerships with faculty, with deans, with students. So we never want to collect data on students. We want to collect data with students and in partnership with students in the way they think.
I wanted to touch back on something that you said earlier as well around qualitative, quantitative data. So we can spend a lot of time talking to students, gathering data on students. One thing that I have actually learned probably in the last 2 years is the power of data within the staff that serve students. I think sometimes we underestimate how much knowledge that you already have within your institution. An example of that is we're building out customer journey maps and trying to kind of map out pain points from a student. But understanding the root cause of what that student is experiencing and talking to faculty and what their experience is, talking to our enrollment coaches, our success coaches, who really led us into the biggest impact area. They're talking to hundreds, if not thousands, of students. And so I think we underestimate the knowledge that also already exists, but you might use analytics and quantitative metrics and know the what, but you're not gonna know the why. And there is a lot there, even I think about SEO data and how students are even coming into our kind of web ecosystem from a kind of enrollment generation standpoint, we even know what keywords that they're searching for and what they're seeking and how we try to understand what they're needing at the end. And so, again, the data is there. Knowing where you should start, and even if it is internally first, and validating those kind of hypotheses is really important. And I just wanted to mention that because I know that's been a huge opportunity for us right now to know where those, I guess, boulders are.
Thank you. I often talk to Annie when we talk about persistence, and I say that finding the data for persistence is like looking for the needle in a needle stack, because there's a lot of data, and trying to figure out which one is going to move the needle is really difficult. I also think, to Amanda's point, listening to your students is a very simple way to get to a root cause pretty quickly. They will tell you exactly what's wrong, often and frequently. They're very good at it, but you have to decide to listen to them, which I think is a challenge that we see. But when you listen to them, you unlock opportunity to help them to get through what they need to get through, which not only supports online, but supports the university as a whole. If we remove friction in the process, it makes an impact holistically. Can you talk, Amanda, a little bit about some of the work we did on the undergraduate application at ASU?
So this is a great example of, we spent a lot of time doing focus groups with our staff that support students and understanding, what are you hearing, what's coming up, what is your biggest kind of pain point. And one of those areas was starting at the beginning of the journey, right? Like, how do we kind of de-frictionalize as we go throughout? And so starting at the beginning and understanding that we have high level of transfer students, right, being online, that process is very complex as we're thinking about not only how do they understand which of their credits transfer into a degree that they're seeking or even into the university, but also the many colleges of, like, at least an average 3 to 4 transcripts that they might be bringing in. And so they might be first year generation students. This is where understanding the personas of the different types of students that you're serving, the level of support they may or may not have. Our coaches were telling us they were spending a lot of time even debugging kind of legacy systems and technologies that have been there for a while. We tend to move very fast at universities. We try to innovate as quickly as we can, but sometimes we work so fast that we kind of stay stagnant in certain places of what was built previously. And so sometimes going back and looking at these very major milestones in a student journey is critical for us to look deeper and make sure it's working. And so this was a great way of, how do we rethink kind of convenience, especially for an online student who probably the worst thing we could do is create friction for them early on. That's easy for them to drop. The amount of information they have to think about, the finances they have to invest in. We need to think about what a seamless journey looks like. So if a student provides us information over here, how do we think about already telling them that they're already 50% of the way done with their being admitted? Why are we asking students in their admissions decisions what they're going to need for financial aid? How do we break this apart? How do we provide visibility to students where they are within kind of that decision-making progress? And so we spent a lot of time actually ingesting data into these systems, one, to validate what we're hearing, two, to get real-time analytics and real-time feedback directly from students. So not only did we have that information, we could democratize that knowledge to all the teams that work across the admissions process. And so that is as easy as putting a pop-up in your application and asking, rate us on a 5-star scale, getting CSAT scores, asking for open-ended feedback, what's working, what's not working, creating a kind of case support mechanism so that if someone has an issue in real time, they can get connected to a coach. And how are we looking at drop-off in the data that goes from page to page within our application? And thinking about this data has allowed us to work better and smarter at a university. It takes the subjectivity out of it, and it makes it more objective to what problem we're trying to solve. And so with that, we've been able to dream of a much larger vision for even how students come in, and then once they're in, how do we start to serve them in a more personalized, individualized way with this data that can actually connect to other systems that right now tend to be in silos based on where that system exists within the university.
I'm just going to, one thing, Annie, and then I'll let you go. You said the C word, which is customer, and we don't say the C word in higher education. But can you talk a little bit about it? Because what I will say is we should say it more frequently. It is a really important thing to contemplate, particularly as more and more institutions go online and you're competing for the same students who are seeking education, and they can move on quickly, and they do. And so can you talk about what it means to have a student customer focus? Because I do think institutions have a tendency to be like, it was hard for me, it's going to be hard for you. That's just the way college is, people. And so how can we reframe around that without kind of undermining the value of what higher education can bring to the table?
It's interesting. When I went to the AIR show, and really when I talk to anyone about AI, everyone talks about teaching and learning. Almost everything is teaching and learning. And don't get me wrong, that is the most important thing that we do for our students. And if I had our presentation, I would have showed you this student journey map and 100 different, yes, 100 different touch points of which your institution, your university, your school district interacts with a student across years, right? Whether it's 4 years, whether it's 2 years, whether it's 8 years. And so when we think about customer journey, student journey, we think about the milestones of which someone goes through this years-long journey with us, thinking about awareness. How do they even hear about us? And that even goes into the branding and marketing and SEO and how we think about what programs we need and the market need to even, okay, now they've expressed some interest. What kind of degree are they wanting? And how do we even think about things like AI and how we're going to recommend based on their interests when we have 800 degree programs to look through at ASU? And that's not at the detriment of the student. We really are doing that to make sure that we are serving the global demand of the challenges that we're facing. And so understanding that there are milestones to now being enrolled or being admitted to enrolled, to retaining and persisting students, to alumni, to lifelong learners, and coming back, and maybe they drop out and they come back, or they leave temporarily, right? And then the anxiety that goes into that, there's an emotional state, there's milestones that they go through, and everyone is different. And so having what we call kind of a map, right? Whether called student, customer, user, a human map of what this looks like. The goal is to evangelize, democratize, and visualize what this map looks like so that we are aligned and talking about the same thing. And I think that alignment is key for us to make sure that we are making the biggest impact we possibly can and strategizing in the right ways.
Annie, do you want to add?
It's about collecting co-informing data. So Amanda's really like upfront. User experience should happen at the beginning of a product, the beginning of a cycle, early days, and then throughout the course of that student journey. And then, from a data-rich, sort of more of a scholarly, more analytics perspective, you want to have data that's quantitative by design, but then you also want to have that qualitative. And so it's the student journey that Amanda's talking about, and this idea of co-informed data collection behind the scenes that allows us to be really strategic with what we're doing with the data to make meaningful impact in the lives of the students. And so it's like thinking with them along the journey and collecting the data that can help us get to where we want to go. And so there's so much data, and then there is this journey, but what about marrying those two together? And it sort of seems obvious, but it doesn't actually happen very easily. And so you have to be intentional with saying, okay, student journey mapped out by Amanda. I mean, imagine how many emails one student may receive from a university. You've been admitted, there's a welcome email from potentially the president, now from the provost, and then your dean and your department and all these other things. It gets lost. A student can potentially get lost in the fray of all this interaction unless you map it out. And if you map it out, then you can be incredibly intentional. And then if you're intentional, you can collect data. And if you can collect that data and analyze that data, then you can even be more strategic. So it's like, at what point from an app submit to being admitted, what does that time frame look like? If you have that data, you can start to model it and look for that peak of interactivity, and maybe that's when you reach out to a student. And so it's like timing is kind of everything, and so if you blend that journey with data, then you can have the timing be on your side and then make impact along the way.
So some of those people won't get into the university. Where do they go? This is a trick question. Amanda, where do they go if they can't get admitted to the university?
So again, as Casey mentioned earlier, our charter is wrapped around inclusivity, access, and student outcomes. We do not deny any student at ASU. They go through our earned admissions program. Not only is that a pathway to improve GPA that might then get them admitted into the university, we also have other pathways like study hall, as Casey mentioned earlier, where maybe a student maybe they were admitted, and maybe they are questioning if based on a syllabi that they look at or all the courses that they might have to take next semester, that they're just not ready, that they need a break, that there's just something that is pausing them. There are other pathways like study hall where it is low risk, low barrier, low cost, and similar to earned admissions and our universal learner courses where you could still earn credit, but you don't have to commit yet to a 4-year degree. And so I think because of ASU's really charter to serve students globally, study hall is a great example of why they don't even have to transfer those credits back to Arizona State University. And so I think there's a lot of great programs that ASU has to ensure students get the same quality education, even if it's not graduating at ASU.
So in that case, the map might look a little bit different. So when you're thinking about maps, are you then thinking about multiple maps depending on where they go?
Thousands of maps.
Thousands.
We've been, like, every time we interview a student, we just talked to one of our Starbucks students, I want to say about a week or so ago, and we've been interviewing about, I think we're on our 20th student in the last few weeks in the current student pipeline, and they weren't even using the benefit of Starbucks. We have a Starbucks partnership that is the barrier around financial aid, and if you're working full-time at Starbucks, you can come to ASU online free of cost. And so they weren't even using the benefit, but even understanding how their journey was so unique, and thinking about when COVID hit, how they transitioned to online and then started going through this benefit that Starbucks offered, and thinking about how they actually dropped back out at that point because they weren't sure if this was the right time for them coming back in. The journeys that happen are all unique. They're all unique and they all happen in different ways, and figuring out where is the friction that is existing for most students as we think about how they're planning their degree and what advising looks like, and how do we think about automating degree planning in a way where students can do it at their own pace and maybe don't need human intervention at that point, but will when they kind of run into certain barriers. It is thousands of different student journeys, and that is where it makes it complicated, and bringing in data from a quantitative kind of standpoint to figure out where is there friction and high points that we can solve holistically that will solve for the majority of students while we still figure out how to help students navigate their own unique journey is really important, but also can be very challenging.
Yeah, because they're not actually just individual discrete data points, right? They're a female who works full-time, who is classified as underrepresented minority status, who's Pell eligible, right? So it's, if you just bucket the data as one aspect, you lose that holistic picture that you're talking about. And so this is basically what I'm describing here is an intersectional identities analysis for those of you that want to go, like look up the literature on that. But we're a big believer in trying to look at the person from a holistic perspective and not to box them into one area, but actually to live with that interpretive flexibility that they have multiple identities, serve those multiple identities, and by doing so, that's actually living and breathing our charter. That is the inclusive excellence, because what Amanda's describing is that personalized journey. And this has not been something like, Amanda, you just stumbled upon this. This is something you've been building toward. It's not like you just woke up and said, this is where we are.
We've been building towards.
Yes, we've been building towards, for sure. But this is, this is a year's worth of getting there, of organizing the data, trying to figure out what matters most, where are those friction points, how can we de-frictionalize them, and then collecting the data and building up that ecosystem. So it's not like that. This journey that we're describing here is not something we just started today.
Right, and I think as we start to kind of go through this, we see where there's gaps. Like we think about maybe a student who has left. How do we think about services like reentry, and how are we bringing them back in? How are we nurturing them? How do we give them that human personalized touch, where we go back and forth a lot around automation and what that means. And I think there's a lot of, there's a lot of support in terms of how humans can provide the emotional need for students that technology can't do. And I come from a technology team. My team builds a lot of the technologies that we have today. And how do we balance those things when we think about scale and quality? We can't have every single student that has a advisor, a enrollment coach, a success coach, a reentry coach. And where's the place where we can bring technology in to help students at a certain point of the journey that is allow them to be successful and still have the university there to be there in times of need. And I think this is a pivotal point of where we are right now to figure out whether it's the application, whether it's transcript processing and thinking about how we bring in OCR tools or AI to help us with better insights and diving into that data and the robust data we have to help make sure that we're being also as efficient and optimizing internally so that we make sure that we can also support students when they need it from that human intervention standpoint.
I have two things, so I'm going to tell you not to let me forget this really interesting question I wanted to ask you. Just remind me. But the first thing I wanted to ask you about was, you mentioned collaboration, and I think I'd like you to kind of expand upon what you mean by collaboration and what kind of collaboration is of value in this type of relationship.
So user experience is a field, big field in Silicon Valley, big tech. We don't consider a team at EdPlus and at ASU user experience. It's a mindset. It's a culture in which we've created. And when we talk about collaboration, there is a high aptitude of collaborative intelligence within EdPlus and within ASU. And when I say that, I remember I started EdPlus about 8 years ago. When we think about silos that naturally exist because we all have very specific goals that we're trying to achieve, right? Whether it's, bringing in a student, converting them, and now it goes over to here and they're in admissions, and then now they're over here and we're gonna be thinking about degree planning. It's not intentional, but what I've noticed that has helped us kind of get to this point around thinking about a comprehensive journey, which everyone in the organization should have visibility into. We all should be working toward together. Just because you're in communications doesn't mean that you shouldn't be strategizing with us how to persist and retain students over here. Just because you build a website or you're analyzing data doesn't mean that you shouldn't be helping us think about how to build experiences that help students and faculty within the course experience. So when I think about collaborative intelligence, it is really how do we work together and bring diverse subject matter expertise to the problems so that we can create the best solutions that inevitably have the most impact. And what I've learned is because we've worked in silos, we're doing great work, we're optimizing, but we're not doing it in a comprehensive way that is solving for a bigger kind of journey-oriented change or transformation.
Do you want to add anything, Annie?
I want you to add to that.
Well, thank you. I do think that centering around a single goal and having a shared vision is an essential component to ensuring that everyone, and their multiple differentiated intelligence, are working on solving really difficult problems, because these are not easy problems to solve, and one person can't solve them alone. So collaboration is just part of what we do. But the question I wanted to ask kind of piggybacks off of this. Is there a magic button that we can hit, or a magic number we can look at? I think of this often because we debate data a lot as a team in some very lively conversations. But is there a number that you wish we would just eradicate from our minds, or that we would focus on more? A measure, I guess, is the better word to use there. I ask this because I have very strong opinions about 6- and 8-year graduation rates. So I'm just wondering what you guys think about things that are norms that have been created by higher education that might not actually help drive what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's the systems that systematize other systems, right? So a lot of the ecosystems that we're all in were built decades and decades ago, right? And so we accept certain ways of operating as the status quo. And then the moment that you start to look at the data, and maybe it doesn't align perfectly with the status quo, and so there's an opportunity there. And so inside of that opportunity begins your journey of kind of transforming things. So I'll give you an example. Yes, 6- and 8-year graduation rates. I'll come back to that. But DEW, so right, people always talk about DEW. And so DEW is your failing the class, you're receiving a D, an E potentially is an F, and then the W is a withdrawal. We collapse these and we call it a DEW measure. But actually, if you just think about it, the W happens at a completely different point in time than the failing grade that would be administered at the end of the semester. But yet we collapse them as one holistic measure of a student potentially not achieving the ultimate goal, which is completing a particular class. And so even just by looking at DEW, you're collapsing potentially problems that could be solved. So what if I told you the DEW rate was actually, students were failing, it was only 2%, but students that were withdrawing were 20%. And those students that were withdrawing were only withdrawing, hovering around 6th, 7th, and 8th day in the semester. Well, there's an opportunity that you just looked at from the data just by uncoupling something that was rendered as the status quo that we all accept. That's in iPad's data. It's everywhere you go, DEW. And I'm not suggesting that we don't look at DEW, but what I'm saying is when you look at the status quo, you ask yourself, how does that data come together, and what data story is actually being hidden by that collapsed understanding that we've all kind of blindly walked into? 6- and 8-year graduation rates is another one. In today's world, it's a thought exercise, right? And I don't personally have the right answer, even though I like to look at the literature and think maybe I'll get close to some sort of central understanding of this, but I would love for students to graduate in like 3 years, okay? But in a world where they're potentially working full time, have tremendous amount of family obligations, we're asking them to put in an incredible investment of time and energy, right? And dedication to seeing something through. If it's truly gonna take them 6 years or 8 years, could we be okay with that? And what systems might we build around that to make it better? And I'm also not entirely sure why it, and my boss is sitting here, so this is special when I'm gonna say this, but like, why is a degree program 120 credits? Why does it take us that long? What if we just said like, you know, we Marie Kondo'd the degree program. If you're familiar with Marie Kondo, okay, she's this phenom, like, you know, organizing genius, right? And she says like, we'll thank the things that no longer serve us. Have we done that as a higher education, K through 12 ecosystem? Have we done that? And here we are at GSV, and this is the perfect time to kind of ask ourselves, what can we Marie Kondo thank that no longer serves us? So, I mean, I don't know. Look, I have a clinical assistant professor line in our College of Global Futures. When I look at those degree programs, it's not that I don't want students to take math or English, right? But I'm just wondering, do they need to take whatever, I'm going to pick something and somebody's not going to be happy with my example, but so, do they need to take, I'm making this up, 3 semesters worth of French? I'm not sure. Maybe not. Or maybe because they want to go work in France and work on this. So it's like, how can we be hyper vigilant about the personalization and really seeing where students are going to go and trying to understand while they're learning? So this is, what Amanda's saying about a student journey is they're learning about who they are, and in real time, we should learn about who they are too and be okay with that data changing. And then if it's no longer serving us and no longer serving them, and ultimately it's not serving them, then we should thank it and maybe attempt something different.
I don't know if you can say anything after that. We're going to Marie Kondo things. Amanda, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think about when I was 18, my identity was being a softball player. Like, that's what I wanted to be. I got a kinesiology degree, and I am now in technology. And so even thinking about my journey, and we think about measurement and what is like the measurement, is it, and I'm going again to my UX hat of like, does them completing an assignment mean success? Is them completing a course mean success? What about the degree? Does that mean success? Is graduation success? But in reality, it's what do they do with that degree, and how are we making sure that they leave us? Even in my situation, that I had a kinesiology degree and I still used my degree and everything I learned to progress me into my next lifelong learning opportunity. And I've learned so much about myself. And I think if the true measurement is really graduating students, it is how are we making sure they're successful? And as Bill Nye said the other day, change the world, which I think is really what our charter is focused on, of we are accountable to our communities. And so student success means how are we preparing graduates to be accountable for their communities? And so I know that's not a silver bullet and that is not an easy thing to do, but I think graduation is that next step to ensuring that students are making it through and getting, whether it's in 4 years or 6 years, that they are finding success within the walls that we are supporting them in.
Yeah, your kinesiology degree, you make us stretch every meeting just to kind of, I'm just kidding, you really don't. But I do think it's interesting to contemplate the ways in which success doesn't mean a linear journey from education to career. We talked about this earlier in a different panel, but I do think we define success, I mean, the way society and the chatter is about education equals degree, that is not real. And if it is, then let's make sure people understand that you can get any degree and be successful, and that your journey might change. People change careers every 5 years now. It's not a linear path to success. Defining that for people so that they can be successful wherever they are, which is what we should want to build as we build a better world, which I agree is our charter. So to wrap up, I wanted to ask you the question of, okay, so this is all great. We've been doing it for some time, and we have this really kind of mature enterprise that's kind of running. Where do you begin? If you don't have anything today, where do you start?
I'll start. So for us, go out into wherever your organization, maybe it's your unit, maybe it is working with faculty, figure out what data exists. Maybe it's surveys. That's where we're starting, at least right now in the course experience, instead of trying to recreate the wheel. Do you have surveys that are out there of why students are dropping, right? Maybe they go to drop, there's already a mechanism there which they're collecting. Maybe there's surveys of when they're talking to different support resources, faculty, and of course, research or surveys there as well that's already available. How do you start to collect that? How do you start to quantify that? You don't have to recreate the wheel, but starting with what already exists will already get you there 10 times faster. So I think that's really important to kind of know what's already out there within your university or your school district or institution.
Yep. I love what Amanda said, so she stole my answer. No, I'm totally kidding. Yeah, we drink from the same well anyway, so it's all the same answer. But okay, so to me, I always think people are like, oh, we need to collect data on this or data on that. And that's great. We can do all of that. But I want to say, where do you think you're going? And so what are those 3 bullet points that you want to put in a meeting to your president, to your provost, to your dean, to your leadership? What are those 3 bullet points that look like success to you? And they could be very specific. They could be time-bound. That would be great. And then if you have those and that's where you're going, then what Amanda just said is perfect, because that would all be the ecosystem that already exists. And so where are you going? What do you already have? And then once you look at that, what's missing? What should you connect, right? What are those discrete parts that if you put them together would make sense? So a roadmap of where you want to go, analyze what you already have, and then think about how to supplement maybe with some new aspects. And then I would also just add, challenge the status quo, because like I said with DEW, just by looking at something as simple as that, it might unpack a whole entire opportunity that might lead to a journey in your own institution. What do you think, Casey?
Thank you, Annie. I always think about priority, because everything is urgent and important and on fire all the time. But if you don't figure out your priority, then you're not going to be able to get anything done. You're going to be spinning and spinning and spinning. And so making sure you have a very clear objective that you're driving toward, and you prioritize all the work around that very clear objective. I also will say not only co-informed data, but co-informed conversations about how we should be looking at data. One of the things that we do in partnership with Action Lab is when I'm looking for specific data or I want some information, I have conversations with Annie and her team, and she provides something and I get feedback, and we just try to kind of move toward the center of what actually will be functional operationally for us to make really good decisions. And so that kind of partnership is special and important to driving change. That's all the time we have today. Thank you for taking the time with us. We will be available for any questions should you have any, so feel free to come up, but thank you for coming.